I'm also not going to take up very much of your time whatsoever, because I don't need to, because I have none of the expertise compared to our speakers and to you. I just wanted to wrap up the day. It's been quite a jam-packed day in lots of ways. We've tried to fit in as much as we can. It's definitely not been training. I share Jill's view. I loathe the word training. It implies that people are empty vessels and some expert will come and fill you up, which is just drivel and completely at odds with all the evidence around learning theory anyway. What I hope it has been is an interesting conversation. It's given you lots of little bits and pieces that you might take away and reflect on and think about and read more. And I hope there's been some bits you disagreed with. We do try and carefully program our events so that it's impossible to agree with every single word that every single speaker says, just to, nourish your brains a little bit. We tend to respect the members of RiPfA a bit too much to spoon feed you things you can just nod along to. So I hope there was a little bit of dissent, politely managed, during the course of the day. So we've had a real gallop through policy, research, local practice and projects, people bringing their lived experience. I think it was, I hope I'm not the only person in the room that found some of it difficult. I think there is some challenge in here. We're all here as the converted, somewhat preaching to the choir, I'm sure. We believe in things like strengths-based working and being able to think about risk in more sophisticated ways. Am I the only person that winced when the cigarette came up? Or thought, oh, those swings look slippy? Or really, up the steps with a hip replacement? Ooh, it's hard. It's hard to think in this way. I mean, when our chief social worker says, I'm a social worker and I still find myself talking to my mum in this way, there's permission to find this stuff hard. Acknowledging it's hard is one of the most important things we can do if we're going to try and overcome those challenges. So a bit of permission to know that this is difficult, I think. I hope you felt that we've tried to live our values today. We talk a lot in RiPfA about combining research, evidence, practice wisdom and expertise from the sector, and the expertise that's born out of lived experience. I hope you felt that we've done that in the way we've constructed our programme. I hope you feel that we've been inclusive in what we've done. A really powerful thread throughout the day has been the phenomenal contribution that older people make, to their families, to the workforce, directly and indeed indirectly. A great point raised that I am helping social workers because I'm looking after my daughter's child, and that's why she's able to be a social worker, often forgotten, that point. The contribution they make to their communities, to the Avon lady, to their streets, to fantastic multimedia microsite resources, as colleagues in this room have helped us produce recently. Hugely, hugely contributing factors and often overlooked, I think, in public discourse. I'm struck as well by some of the dichotomies in this work. We've acknowledged that we need to not be risk-averse. We mustn't be risk-averse. But we also need to not have blind spots. It might not be okay for every person to pull themselves up the steps, having just had a hip replacement. Both things are true. Both those things are valid. The issue of innovation versus being evidence-informed, I don't think there is necessarily a tension there, but I know it can feel like it on the ground. We're doing something really, really innovative. It might not work, and then our lead member might not fund it next year. Or we're doing something really tried and tested and off the shelf, and our communities aren't interested because it feels like it's the 90s for them. Let's not forget care management was pretty tried and tested initially when we thought we first adopted it. So that can be a tension. I think also I've picked up on the importance of having an uncomfortable conversation. Having an uncomfortable conversation with the doctor, that they are terrifically important and a very valuable member of the wider workforce, but they're not necessarily your boss. And that can be uncomfortable, but very, very important. Having an uncomfortable conversation with older people and their families around end of life. How do you be strengths-based about end of life? Well, you can, but it's hard. It can feel very, very difficult. We've talked about integration. I find myself agreeing with Jill, as I often do. I'm a bit bored of talking about health and social care intervention. Perhaps that shouldn't have been streamed, actually, given the job I have. But I can't help but feel that we've also trodden that path so much we've forgotten why we're walking down it. It probably isn't going to save any money. It may or may not make a difference to outcomes. But what we're doing in a fragmented way is a bit rubbish too, and maybe that's enough of a reason to focus on integration. More interestingly, I think today, we've talked about integration in other areas. The integration of social work and housing, for example. We very deliberately had that session, and more than one of you said, that's a funny session. And it was, in all senses of the word. I think you'll agree. Linda's fantastic. But I think we need to think about integration far beyond health and social care. The integration of older people and younger people, whether that's through pen pal arrangements, volunteering opportunities, the contribution they can make to younger people, and an integration of your values and your role function. How do you make the job you're asked to do integrate better with the values you hold as a professional group? And that's the Holy Grail right there. We've also heard from a number of colleagues, not least from someone towards the end, about the work you're doing in your authorities. And I think Linda and Witten Lodge made this point very clearly as well. It's a marathon, not a sprint. In fact, in Linda's case, it's a 25-year vocation. This doesn't change overnight. You know, we have to be committed to this for the long haul. We have to be, and that will be grinding and demoralizing and demotivating sometimes. So your resilience is really, really key. If you're going to keep up the good fight, you need to have some armor on, you know. It takes time to change cultures. I think there's an important challenge for us. But we talked about being overprotective. I had a few conversations over lunch with colleagues who said, oh, we know we're so overprotective. It stops us being enabling. It stops us seeing the strengths in people. And I think there's an even more difficult reflection. Who are we protecting? Are we really being overprotective of the older person in front of us? Or are we protecting our organisational reputation, our professional registration, our career chances? Have we got legal whispering in our ear? You know, sometimes we're not even protecting the right thing when we're being overprotective, and that's a very, very hard and soul-searching conversation, I think, to have. And we absolutely cannot ask frontline, I hate that term, sorry, frontline practitioners. Who are we fighting? Service users. You know. People involved in direct practice. We cannot ask them to work in a strengths-based way if we haven't got a strengths-based organisational culture. It's something that I know Lisa talks about a great deal. You have to do it from the top, with feeling, on purpose, every single day, including the days you feel rubbish. And that's very, very difficult. If we want resilient people, resilient communities, strengths-based practice, we need resilient learning, strengths-based management, which requires resilient learning, strengths-based leadership and strategy. I think Lynn embodies that. From a national perspective, she does that beautifully. And somewhere between what Lynn's championing and what your staff do on a Tuesday afternoon with Mrs. Jackson, that's where the magic needs to start happening, in the middle, in that organisational culture, strategy, local policies. Some really nice practical examples coming from some colleagues in the room today. We need a resilient workforce, because this stuff is difficult. On a lighter note, we are here to make your difficult jobs a little bit easier. That's the point of RiPfA. I was really, really pleased to hear some of the positive points being made about local authorities as employers and of middle management and the role they play. We know local authorities can be great employers, and they don't just pay for you to come here today, they pay for you to be part of the RiPfA network. They are investing in their workforce despite the fact there aren't two pennies to rub together sometimes. And I think that's a really important part of how you respect your workforce, is give them access to good quality learning. We would not ask scaffolders to do their job without hard hats. We shouldn't be asking the social work workforce to do its job without evidence in all its guises. It's immoral. Completely immoral. The work you do is far too complex, far too important to do it without good learning and development opportunities, good reflective supervision, good access to networking opportunities. So we're a network. We want to be walking alongside you. It's one of the great joys of doing this job is that we don't do conferences and say, ta-da, at 4:30, and that's the end of it. You're in the club. I was going to say gang, but that's got negative connotations in the current climate. You're in the club now. You know, you're part of RiPfA. Let's make sure that we continue the conversation. We will be sending you links out to relevant resources, some lovely stuff on risk enablement that Imogen's done, a resource around how you keep social work values and voice alive in an integrated context. We've got a lovely, lovely book coming soon. It's aging poor Lisa in dog years, I suspect. But there's going to be a fantastic book coming out in the autumn about complexity and working with complexity. We want to make sure that we're keeping you tuned into those conversations, because we only exist because of you. You choose our topics, you review our publications, and I have to say you're harder markers than any of our academic peer reviewers. You take part in our events, you take part in our webinars, you co-produce resources with us, you co-produce gorgeous microsites. We only exist because of you and for you. We don't have any private shareholders, we don't have to sell newspapers to stay alive, we don't get any government grants, and believe me, we get no philanthropic donors. No one leaves their legacy to evidence-informed practice. You know, there's a donkey sanctuary down the road that's definitely getting more than us. So we exist entirely for you and because of you and with you. And I hope that's how it's felt today in all the other work that you do with us. So it just remains to say some homework bits before I do the thank yous. Please don't forget that form I mentioned in your packs that Basra put in about getting involved in their work to develop the capability standards and the CPD pathway for older people. You've clearly got a lot to offer. I'd really encourage you to contribute to BASWA's thinking there. Please don't forget to do your evaluation forms. We do rather like evidence, so do answer all the questions. Don't nullify the data, please. I assure you, we read them in forensic detail and absorb everything you've told us. And finally, some thank yous. Huge thanks to our speakers who've been engaging and passionate and disciplined and flexible and shaved time off and added films in and all sorts of other exciting things. It's been really, really great to work with you, and it's incredibly difficult to, I think I said it when Alison spoke, people who are that knowledgeable and that passionate, and you say, can you do it in 20 minutes, please? I mean, it's grossly insulting, and it takes a very egoless expert to say, yeah, I'm up for that. That sounds interesting. I can't thank you enough for taking part in today. Really, really appreciate it. Huge thanks to the team, including our AV fellas. I know it's been a slightly tricky couple of days for you. We've worked really, really hard, and I hope it's felt that we've worked really hard. I hope you felt a bit cared for, a bit loved, a bit well-fed, a bit of daylight as well. It's rare at a conference, isn't it? And we do want to make you feel a bit loved, and I use that word unashamedly, because it is relational, the business we're in, not transactional, just as we've talked about today. And thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I know you will have to go home and do the work you didn't do today, or do it on Saturday or Sunday, or, God forbid, miss your kids' school play to do the work that you didn't do today. Thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you for having the self-respect to take part in learning, because your job's too important to do without that. We really, really appreciate everything that you do with us and for us. So safe journeys home, everyone. Take care.